Um, so I'm going to take things for a different turn of events, away from trails, although trails and river access are a really important component of this, and switch gears to talk about watershed planning and water quality. Save the Sound, working with Weston O'Neill and a number of volunteers, recently completed a watershed-based plan for the Mill River watershed, which was funded through a DEP Section 319 grant. The watershed plan was the last of 3 plans for the rivers draining into New Haven Harbor. And unfortunately, the maps aren't quite to scale, but the Mill River watershed is kind of the smallest of the 3 rivers, with the West River on the west side of the city, the Mill River in the middle, and then the Quinnipiac River all the way to the east. And the Mill River watershed plan, because it was the last of the 3, was kind of put into this framework of the Mill River has its own unique set of issues and its own unique set of users, but at the same time, there's 2 other rivers in very close proximity, so we wanted to make sure that the recommendations in the plan dovetailed. And all 3 of these rivers and New Haven Harbor are plagued with bacterial impairments. So the idea that if we can capture as much stormwater and make recommendations as consistent as possible throughout these 3 watersheds, the easier it's going to be for municipalities to actually implement them and start thinking about these watersheds as a whole, and not just water that runs through the city. Like the West River and the Quinnipiac, the Mill River encompasses both Hampton and New Haven. It's kind of that big swath in the middle of both towns. But then it also takes up a large portion of the town of Cheshire, and then small portions of Wallingford, North Haven, Prospect, and Bethany. It's a 38 square mile watershed and drains basically north to south like all rivers in the area. But a lot of the land use within the watershed, it looks really green on this map, but it's actually a very densely developed river. A lot of the small streams leading into the watershed are forested, but there's a lot of residential land use and a lot of homes that back right up to the river. Like most urbanized watersheds in Connecticut, a lot of segments of the Mill River are included in the State Integrated Water Quality Report, and it's probably slightly more impaired than it looks just based on data that's being collected in sampling locations. So there's 5 segments of the Mill River and its tributaries that are currently impaired from bacteria for recreation and aquatic life use, which basically means that the fish and macroinvertebrates that you would expect to find in this type of stream just aren't there, and that there's elevated bacterial levels throughout the watershed. Land use seems to be the driving factor behind the impairments within the Mill River watershed. Looking at the watershed as a whole, there's about 15% impervious cover, but looking at the map all the way to the left, the main stem of the Mill River has impervious cover between 27 and 39%, pretty much for the entirety of the river. And just to put it into perspective, the state's impervious cover plan recommends that high-quality streams, or streams that are able to support aquatic life, should have an impervious cover of no less than 12%. So the watershed as a whole obviously exceeds it, but when you look at the main stem of the Mill River, there's a lot of pavement leading right up to the river. And part of it, you can see standing right where we are now, there's a lot of historic development that happened along the river because it was a working river and still is a working river. Whitney Ave and Route 10 parallel the Mill River pretty much from New Haven Harbor straight up, and along with the commercial districts that are associated with the busy corridor. There's a lot of homes that were initially built based around the scenic river. There's several golf courses that are cleared almost completely up to the river. And then there's also things like the Mill River Trail that JR was talking about, which goes through a heavily industrialized area. And kind of that southern portion of the river is still very much a working waterfront. And then just kind of looking at the other 2 maps, which are there just more as comparison. A lot of the watershed is sewered, but it is also a drinking water supply watershed as well as a CSO watershed. And RWA and the Greater New Haven Water Pollution Controller to make it very clear that those are not in the same area. So the northern section of the watershed is a drinking water supply watershed, and below the Lake Whitney Dam is still a combined sewer system, which basically means the sanitary and storm sewers through most of New Haven are still combined, which on a dry weather day, it's not a bad thing because all the water goes to the wastewater treatment plant. But when it rains and the storm drains fill up and the wastewater treatment plant is working at capacity, anything that's going into the storm drain, being sanitary or stormwater, spills right out into the Mill River. So in addition to reducing water quality impairments, which is the focus of almost all watershed-based plans, this plan follows the EPA's 9-element process, which really has a direct framework for looking at how to address non-point source pollution or stormwater runoff going into the river. But with the diverse group of stakeholders that were involved in this project, there are some other things that were looked at and were considered, and access and education were really a big component of this plan. Because it is a highly industrialized river with these kind of commercial corridors going through, a lot of people don't always realize how close to the river they are. There are times driving up Route 10 that you can see the river, but a lot of it is behind businesses or behind parking lots or behind a lot of overstory or invasive vegetation that it really, a lot of ways, just thought of as a way to convey stormwater away from the street and not really thought of as what it could be, which is really a beautiful river. It flows through Sleeping Giant State Park. It's really a lovely portion. The northern portion of the watershed is a lot of small streams with a lot of forest cover and a lot of homes, but when you're standing in the stream, you don't realize how close to kind of businesses and residential areas you are. The momentum around the watershed plan really came from the active groups within the watershed. The Mill River Trail advocates have started a lot of work in the southern portion. The Whitneyville Civic Association, which is this neighborhood that we're in right now, had really started looking at how they could tie their neighborhood more closely to Lake Whitney and the river and making it more of a part of their community and not just something that's on the eastern edge. The Cheshire Land Trust was another driving force behind this. They've been doing a lot of stewardship activities within the watershed and are really good at thinking about the river holistically. And as much as they want it to be a beautiful asset within their community, they realize how important water quality is for the river as a whole and want as many people to know about the watershed and be involved with it as possible. So the watershed plan was focused on non-point source pollution, but we've also kind of looking at projects within the plan. How can we make sure that they're highly visible, that there's a lot of opportunities to engage not just volunteer groups, but have it something that people see on a regular basis and learn about. So we've included 10 projects in the watershed plan looking at addressing these issues. And what was really exciting about this plan was the amount of momentum behind it. Before the plan was even completed and submitted to DEEP, there were groups already working to implement the plan. Hamden had put together a proposal to use basically a wetland in the middle of Town Center Park to treat stormwater going in. And that's one of the first projects to be implemented from the plan. We received another DEEP 319 grant working with the town that would take Town Center Park, which I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with that area. It's right next to the Hamden Library. It's a large green space which has a lot of community events and is right next to the middle school. And so closer to the middle school section of the park, there's currently a large culvert that drains about 800 acres of residential properties, which it's a pretty densely developed area. And the stormwater depression that the outfall currently goes out to is significantly undersized. So during a small rain event, even like a half-inch rain event, which is slightly more rain than we got last night, the Town Center Park just floods, and the stormwater sheet flows, which this top picture on the left shows water coming from the stormwater outfall, which has created a channel through the vegetation, which sheet flows across the grass area, which I've been out there with in slightly bigger rain events and seeing whitecaps in the middle of Town Center Park, which is really a strange phenomenon when you're standing in the middle of a grassy field during a rainstorm. Across the field into another channel where you've got a lot of volume of water and a lot of speed going into another pipe and then straight into Shepherd's Brook Diversion Channel, which is a small spur of Shepherd's Brook, which is an impaired waterway. So what they're proposing to do is basically create a scenic wetland that would intercept the water coming out of that channel and put it into a depression slightly bigger than the rain gardens that Connecticut Audubon was talking about. Fill it with native plants. It could be used as an education lab for the middle school, but would also collect a lot of the stormwater coming out of that pipe and allow it to infiltrate naturally in place. And then anything that was overflowing during a really large storm event would have the opportunity to first be filtered out by the plants. Debris would be captured before it actually moved into the channel. And then it would have time to slow and for water to sink into the ground as much as it possibly could before going directly into Shepherd's Brook. For hopefully, if stormwater was actually reaching Shepherd's Brook, it would be clean stormwater. And so we just got this grant, so hopefully, either within the summer or fall, construction will start on this project. And the town of Hamden was really excited about it and is committed to doing almost all of the work with their public works department, which is a good mindset too for the town to start thinking about how they can incorporate green infrastructure and projects that capture stormwater and things that they can do on their own and not necessarily have to hire out people to do it themselves. So this is kind of their first foray into green infrastructure installation. So it's a pretty exciting partnership, not just for the Mill River, but also for the town, who's got a lot of enthusiasm about doing these types of projects. The second project that we're looking to really move forward, JR had already talked about, is at the intersection of Haven and Exchange Street in New Haven, which is just south of Grand Avenue, and the section of Mill River Trail that has been recently completed. So on this map, just to the north is Grand Avenue. And right now there's a very small side street, Haven Street, which has one storm drain all the way at the bottom of the street. And then this dead-end portion of road, which is really just degraded pavement. It had been used as an illegal dumping site, so the city has put boulders up across the road to keep people from driving down there. So it's a completely unused segment of road to nowhere. It backs up to one of the salt piles along the Mill River, but the salt pile isn't accessed from that way. There's just a Jersey barrier behind it. So right now we're working with the city, Mill River Trail Group, and a design firm to kind of put together the final designs for this through a small grant that'll be done by the end of May, which will take all of the pavement out of this dead-end portion of road and convert it into bioretention and rain gardens. So it'll serve a number of purposes. It'll be a destination along the Mill River Trail. It'll provide connections from Grand Avenue South, which this map doesn't show it, but on the south side of the playing fields, there's another small street, which is less than a city block, which is where you would connect to Crisculla Park. So that kind of southern portion of Fairhaven would be connected along assigned green space. There'd be bioretention to capture stormwater, which the whole property right now slopes towards that salt pile. So a lot of water bypasses the catch drains, goes down a paved roadway, and then you can kind of see it in here. It goes under a Jersey barrier, under the salt pile, and into the river. So hopefully we'll stop a lot of that surface flow, which will take pollutants out of the river, but also keep it from undermining the bottom of the salt pile and adding more salt inputs to the river than it needs. And it'll also take water out of the combined sewer system, so it should help to mitigate combined sewer overflows. And then the other nice component about this playing field is connected directly to an elementary school, the John Martinez School, which happens to be a magnet school focused on sea, air, and sky. So the teachers are really excited about the opportunities to kind of take their kids out from the classroom and into kind of an area where they can let them see what happens and do some further study. This effort has also taken an exciting turn and reinvigorated the Mill River Watershed Association, which was a volunteer group that was put together by Tom Holohan, who did a lot of work along the Mill River. And there were a few active residents that were kind of focused around the Mill River Trail and a few other things. But it kind of dwindled over the year, I think, just kind of for that lack of enthusiasm. And since the plan has come out, the group has really shown a lot of enthusiasm. The steering committee that put together the watershed plan and the existing members have kind of joined forces, and we've pulled in a lot of new members as well. That the idea is not just to push forward the watershed plan, but also to really kind of identify volunteer opportunities and how do we connect the community and the river, which I think is really something everyone in this room has been thinking about, is how do we connect people to the bodies of water that are around them. And the next meeting of the Mill River Watershed Association is actually on Tuesday at the Lake Whitney treatment plant, where we're going to talk about, work that we want to move forward and some grants that we've submitted, and then have RWA present on the work that they're doing, because they're very vested in the Mill River watershed, just because it is a scenic, it's not just a scenic river to them, it's also their bread and butter. So they want to make sure that clean water is going into Lake Whitney, which makes their job easier. But they're also very open to promoting the Mill River and making sure that people are aware that this is a drinking water supply watershed. And they'll also be doing a tour of the treatment plant. And if anyone is interested, the group also usually meets on the second Tuesday of the month at 6 o'clock across the street at the Eli Whitney Museum. So this is kind of a special event meeting as well as just a watershed meeting. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about the Mill River watershed or what we're doing or what we hope to do. And my contact information is up there too, just in case anyone would like to reach out to me afterwards. Yeah.
You mentioned the salt piles on the bottom there. A lot of these towns over the last 10 years have been moving brine on the roads rather than salt and sand. Has there been any kind of study of the effect of that brine washing into the rivers and the watershed?
There are studies. It's a very hot button issue. There's kind of two schools of thought. Some think that by introducing additional salt to the river is a bad thing, and others feel that it's a saltwater water body, that it's already salty, so bringing this natural salt into the environment doesn't do a lot of harm. I think it is important to note that when you're standing in the Mill River, you can see a very large salt pile on the west bank, and then the smaller salt pile, which is at the end of Haven and Exchange Street. Those are actually both private salt piles. They're not the city's salt pile, and it's not salt that is being distributed to municipalities. And at least the salt pile currently on the east bank is no longer a water-dependent use. So kind of through the work with City Plan and the Mill River Trail, they're working to kind of figure out how to balance the need for that property owner to access the water versus their need to move salt in and out by land.
Well, I'm also talking about the municipalities like the Wallingfords, the Cheshires. They're all using the brine instead of salt and sand. That's all washing into the tributaries that come into the rivers. Is that affecting the wildlife? Is there any studies on that?
There are studies on that. I can't speak to them right now. I do know that a lot of the studies have shown that brine doesn't wash off as easily as doing solid salting, which is one of the reasons there has been that transition. And it also, because it sticks to the road better, it has better de-icing properties, and they end up using a smaller volume of salt as opposed to if they were just dropping sand and salt on the road.
Thank you.
This is kind of to the brine question. One thing to be aware of with brine is that with fracking waste, they're now trying to that's a salty brine that they use. They're trying to reuse fracking waste as brine, which is why there's such a movement in Connecticut for municipalities to not accept fracking waste. And hopefully that'll become a statewide thing. But if your town hasn't passed a ban on fracking waste, you might want to look into it if you're worried about brine. Because radioactive stuff can be in that brine, all kind of nasty stuff can be in that brine.
Yeah, I can throw my 2 cents. And the practice of a pre-applying brine, DOT will tell us that they're actually using less salt than they did prior to when they were using de-icing as opposed to anti-icing. So their pre-treatment actually reduces the total amount of salt that they use. That said, the effect on the rivers, certain types of insects may be, invertebrates may be very sensitive, so there is an effect. Anywhere you have impervious areas, you have other pollutants that affect as well. But really the areas that are most susceptible are the isolated waters, like vernal pools, where you get runoff into the vernal pools, you can get a lot of problems there. And another thing that's being discovered more and more is groundwater. The sodium chlorides leach into the groundwater, so that oftentimes we're finding the highest concentrations of salt are in August, when the streams are totally dependent upon groundwater discharge for flow. So you don't get as much in winter when there's melt as you do in August when there's just enough water to keep the stream alive and you've got groundwater. So that's something that we have to be aware of. Obviously there's there's a downside to too much salt. Thank you.